here.
We are here. We are actually both in the same place at the same time for this go around. It's been about almost half a year.
Is that real?
Yeah, I think we have done solo episodes and alternative interviews, and this is actually our first just one-on-one podcast that we've done together since we started kind of doing this.
Pod fell off for a second. Be real with you. But Pod's back. Pod's bigger and badder than ever. It's on YouTube. It's still not on Apple. Listen, there's only so many hours in the day.
One can only upload to Apple once a month, maybe.
There's really like something happens in my brain when the task comes to be like, all right, today's the day that I have to get the podcast somehow onto Apple, and then I forget my Apple password. It's just not going to happen.
It might not happen ever.
Yeah, fuck Apple, whatever.
Yeah, but we're also on Spotify, and we are also on Patreon.
Yeah.
And we're, as Jake has already said, we are on YouTube. But if you love what we do, I think we should start off with a plug or two before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what we're talking.
Yeah, we can plug later.
Okay, we can plug later. Just plug the fact that you can subscribe to our Patreon, you can buy a magazine, you can do whatever you can to kind of get the word out about us, and also just that Jake and I are happy to have gotten 2 things published, but we'll talk about that later.
Right. We got 2 things published, but we'll talk about that later. Because this is a hyper focused episode. The podcast has taken on a new character where we don't just bullshit for an hour. We're doing research now. We're looking into things. We're uncovering the truth, and we're approaching the podcast with information and focus.
We are more academic than we've ever been before.
Right. And so I guess good time to introduce the topic of the podcast today is going to be Mark Robinson. And before we go and say anything, I guess we should probably start by saying we're not pro Mark Robinson in any regard. Mark Robinson's and the trial of Mark Robinson it's just an interesting flashpoint for a lot of things, I guess, within the American political aesthetic and the American political arena, and maybe, I guess, the ways in which our consent for our own repression is manufactured by the political aesthetic within the United States.
That's a very good way to start off. And yes, I will second that. Jake and I both find Mark Robinson and the political party apparatus surrounding his activity and his statements, even before the stuff came out about him and his online activity, bubbled to the surface. And one thing that we kind of want to as part of this preface to show that we are not fans of this guy. He has said, to kind of give a little bit of background on who Mark Robinson is, because first we're going to be...
We'll do the back. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, Mark...
Why is Mark Robinson in the news right now?
Sure. Thank you, Jake. Mark Robinson, to kind of give a little bit of background about him, he is the current lieutenant governor of North Carolina, and he is running for the governorship, or the governor's office of North Carolina. He gained or came to national prominence in 2020 when he was in a city council meeting, I believe in Raleigh, North Carolina, where he...
He's from Greensboro, actually.
Oh, he's from Greensboro. Okay. So it probably was in Greensboro where he... Yes. He gave this speech, a very impassioned speech at this city council meeting, where he is talking about the fear that he has for legal, law-abiding gun owners. And it was a very impassioned speech. And that went viral on right-wing circles, mainstream media. It was a very heavily circulated clip throughout not only social media, but television, radio, whatever. And he then propelled him to the nomination of running for lieutenant governor and got it. He then, to kind of give a little more background of who he is a former factory worker.
He's a furniture worker, or the manufacturing and selling. I don't know if he's manufacturing or selling furniture. So prior to his virality, he was getting a history degree at North Carolina A&T and wanted to be a history teacher, and then went viral and then dropped out of school and ran for lieutenant governor, which is like, I guess, like the new political fast track. This is kind of like I guess AOC was like in grad school or something, but exactly. You go viral and you're like, all right, like now I'm ready to be a politician.
Yeah, exactly. And he was the right wing version of that. Right. And then during his tenure as lieutenant governor, which is an office he still holds, he decided,
which if you don't know what lieutenant governor is, it is the second highest position in state government.
Yes.
Which is fucking insane. This guy, once you see like the things that this guy said, and also like who he is, where he came from, like it's insane. That like if the actual governor of North Carolina steps out of the state, he has to go on business to California, Mark Robinson is in charge legally.
He is literally the de facto state vice presidential office and the highest executive in the land when the governor is out of beyond state lines. So Mark Robinson decided about a year and a half ago. About a year and a half ago, decided to run for the governorship of North Carolina against the Democratic nominee, Josh Stein. During this time period, he has a long and sordid history of pretty choice statements he's made about not only marginalized people, but members, because he is a black man, of his own, quote-unquote community. And he has on multiple occasions said that women should not have access to their reproductive health. He has said even further in church meetings where it is recorded, you can look this up, he has said that, I'm going to get in trouble for this, quote unquote, but Christian women need to be led by, quote, Christian men. And I'm sorry, but that's just how it's going to be. He has also said that he doesn't think that the very existence of LGBTQ people, gay people, trans people across the spectrum should even be discussed. Their very existence shouldn't even be discussed in a classroom settings, and has actually compared their existence to, quote, filth. Right. He has called them filth. And a last thing that he said was that he said the civil rights movement was a net negative on the general black American community because, quote, it ruined a lot of black-owned businesses. And if you kind of think about this, if you're familiar with someone like Paul Beatty's work, he sounds a lot like the narrator and the secondary character Hominy in Paul Beatty's award-winning satirical novel, The Sellout. He is almost a copy-and-paste version of this guy. He just so happens to be the second highest-ranking executive in the state of North Carolina.
Right. And so he's kind of like a neocon shill. Like, he became viral, took an office, and then in order to, try to win the governorship, just kind of adapted to the most outrageous neoconservative, hateful points of view. But he got fucking nailed by. And so what ended up happening was he flew a little too close to the sun, and his internet history came out. And it turns out that he's kind of a pervert. And so I guess in CNN and I believe Politico is the first to run the story. His online activities came out that he was like on a lot of like porn sites and porn forums, saying kind of outrageous things. Like, and it is this, and they're like, God, what does he say? Like, it's this strange act, I guess, like on CNN where he's like, well, actually, like, you know, Mark Robinson like doesn't believe or says he's against trans rights, but look at him here. He actually really likes trans porn.
Wait, yeah.
And so, like, he's like, his character has just been kind of like completely defamed and slandered by his online activity, during which time he said things like, "I'm a black Nazi. I would have joined the Klan if I could." What else?
Outright. Another thing that I forgot to mention, even before this, online activity leaked in the Washington Post article that came out.
I think it's Politico.
Politico is the one who did the investigation after, but the Washington Post was the mainstream news outlet that broke the story. And one thing that he said outright is that he flirted a lot with Holocaust denial. He has consistently thrown a lot of anti-Semitic tropes out there, and he has said it publicly on his own private and personal Facebook forum, and even has clipped out videos of himself saying a lot of Holocaust denial theories that are coded in more kind of right-wing rhetoric.
Right. And I mean, if you like take the time to actually look at the comments, like you can see that it's like he's pretty like 4chan'd out. Like he's just hella online. And it's the type of like comment that you would see like a dude in 10th grade make in 2010, like on 4chan, like prior to this he also didn't. I don't think he anticipated being, being in office, and so it is this really funny moment where he has this like pretty fucked up history of being, I don't know what, just too based online.
Yeah.
And it's now coming back to defame him. Yeah. So I mean, you can look up the comments. There's a lot of stuff. Some of it's pretty fucking funny.
Yeah.
There's like he's like on there like talking about like drinking his wife's sister's cum. I think is like one of the more explicit ones. Which like once again like CNN is like running like as like see like we got him.
Yeah. It reeks a lot of more of like an extreme version of when Sarah Palin's daughter came out that she was actually a teenager while she was pregnant.
Right.
And like that was kind of like how MSNBC really ran with that, going like, oh, real family values, which was honestly pretty sexist and pretty like cruel.
Yeah, dude, CNN fucking sucks.
Yes, but at the
and so is MSNBC. Dude.
Yes. We're not defending, not to cut you off, but again, to preface once more, we are not defending.
They got it.
Okay.
They got it. We said it enough. As Mark Robinson, as he stands now, is his entire support base has kind of dropped out. His staff is down to like 3 people, and it's looking like he's probably not going to win the election. But hey, who knows? North Carolina surprises a lot of people all the time.
Yes.
But what is actually kind of interesting about Mark Robinson and the defaming of Mark Robinson does have to do with, I guess, my perspective on the contemporary political arena as a means of test running repression and seeing how much you can get away with. And this is like, I guess this requires you to adapt a perspective that there is no left or right within this country when it comes down to like the real truth of it. That there is just a cartel in the center that doesn't really care much about anything besides continuing to make a bunch of money. And I guess, controlling the populace and tightening the means of repression upon its populace as much as it can, so it'll allow it to make more money in the most efficient way possible. And you can see this in, I guess, the way that the information about Mark Robinson was obtained and how it's actually being publicly flaunted by these media centers, by Politico, by CNN. It's not hidden. Like, if you look at the story, Mark Robinson's online information from a decade ago on niche porn sites such as Nude Africa begin to, like, make its way out. Like, I hear that, and I think, okay, like, how the fuck did they find that? Like,
yeah.
Like, where did that come from? And, you know, at first I was like, okay, like, maybe, like, I'm just being, like, a little paranoid, but it's, like, I mean, you can go, like, read the, like, a political article, and they'll actually just, like, tell you that, what they did in order to get the website, or to get the information. So what ended up happening was, information of Mark Robinson's online passwords and email addresses were leaked in a, like, big hack, and the information was accessed through, like, a dark web forum by the Southern Poverty Law?
Yeah, it's Southern Poverty Law Center.
What did I say?
Southern Poverty Law Center, I believe, is their...
Yeah, the Southern Poverty Law Center, basically... Yeah, here we go. Southern Poverty Law Center found this information in a data breach, found a series of passwords that matched across different websites, linked them to an IP address that was in Mark Robinson's area of Greensboro, North Carolina, and then determined that this was the username in question was Mark Robinson, which, in fact, it is.
Yes.
And, yeah, we're not debating that. But does that not sound like, you know, that the means in which that information was obtained and then applied in the public sphere feels strange to me. And the way in which the left accepts this is as necessary and good because a bad guy on the right is being given his justice is concerning and leads. And this is a trend in the United States, is that if you want to try out a means of repression and you want to see how much, like, you can get away with it, you just have to stoke up enough liberal fear, and so in order to give it a shot. And so the fact that this information has its origins in the Southern Poverty Law Center is also concerning because that is sort of their bread and butter. You know, I think a lot of people have, like, a cursory understanding of what the Southern Poverty Law Center is because they put out a list of hate groups in the country every single year, and so everyone knows that, like, they're, like, these, like, hate group watchdogs, and they're based in some southern town, Memphis, maybe Memphis.
I think Memphis.
But what people don't actually know about them is that it's kind of like a non-profit ripoff that profits off of stoking northeastern liberal fear. And this has kind of been the history of the Southern Poverty Law Center from its beginning. Let's see. I think in the 1980s, there's a very famous example of this is when the Southern Poverty Law Center sort of, like, came to, like, public prominence was in this area of the 80s when they began trying members of the Ku Klux Klan and making a big, like, public deal out of it, putting a lot of press around their, like, their trying of members of the Klan, suing members of the Klan, etc. So once again, on the surface, that sounds good, right? We don't like the Ku Klux Klan.
Indeed.
That's bad. But, like, the Ku Klux Klan at that point had, like, 3,000 members. Like, in the 1920s, the Ku Klux Klan is a big issue. It is the second biggest Masonic order in the country, or fraternal order in the country, beaten only out by the Masons. You would go to any city in America, open a newspaper, flip 2 pages, and you would see an ad to join the Klan. It was massive. Like, it was the biggest fraternal order in the United States. It was fucking huge in the South, and it was pretty big in the North. Like, it was all over. But by the 80s, it wasn't really a thing anymore. Like, there was like still some like weird hangers on to it, but like the membership had dropped about 3,000, and so, and like the real locales of hate within the country had relocated and popped up in other more like tricky areas. But the Southern Poverty Law Center is not about justice; it's about marketing, and it's about donations. It's about making money. The reason that the Southern Poverty Law Center took such an interest in trying the members of the Ku Klux Klan throughout this period of time is not because it was like the most just thing to do, or that it was the biggest issue as it concerns American hate groups. It was because it was the most marketable and also the easiest to win, legally speaking. Because, like, I mean, when you're dealing with someone in the Ku Klux Klan, it's not like you're dealing with like the most intelligent person in the world. Like, this is like a fucking like ancient fraternity that's the basis of is like flat out racism. Like, if you exist in the modern in the modern state, like, you at least, and you are racist, like, you at least have the understanding that you can't be KKK outwardly racist anymore if you want to like have a job. So like, what it did do was stoke up a lot of fear in the Northeast amongst disconnected wealthy liberals, that there were these like mongoloids down in the South that you could take into a courtroom and say, "Sir, is it true that you hate black people?" And they would look you in the eye and they say, "That is true." Like, yeah, of course. Like, the easiest case of all time. We got you. You just said it. And so, as it relates to Mark Robinson, it does feel really interesting that like the Southern Poverty Law Center is the source for this information, which is kind of like was also like unethically sourced. What's like, and as the Southern Poverty Law Center like continues, like it's not about anything other than making more money, and that's why the annual list of hate groups that come out are not necessarily like to be trusted, and it's not any coincidence that there are more hate groups on the list every year, because it's not really about, like, this is not like a federal institution. This is a private non-profit entity that makes all of its money off of donations from people on the left in the Northeast that will only give you money if you can make them scared.
And to kind of round out that point of like who is on this list, who is necessarily on this list. It's not only groups in the Southern Poverty Law Center, like watch list as some people would call it. It's also individuals. And one instance of there being a lot of mistakes, well, of course, there are a lot of members of that people on that list, like the Proud Boys, the KKK, the Die Stürmer, and the neo-Nazis that run the Daily Stormer newsletter. Those people are legitimately placed in hate groups, but it almost seems like, based upon the political climate or the general geopolitical atmosphere of the time that this list goes out, is reflected very much in what is the overall neoliberal bend that the Southern Poverty Law Center is catering to. So, one instance, the Great March of Return in Gaza in 2018, when thousands of Palestinians did a largely nonviolent protest going to the border of northern Gaza, where over 300 people were either made physically disabled or killed by IDF snipers. You can read the UN report. There's hundreds of pages of how the IDF pretty much created an atrocity. There were a lot of Jewish American groups that spoke out in solidarity with the Palestinian protesters. And the Southern Poverty Law Center, at the time of releasing this, did a lot of, doxing of individuals and groups that were run by Jewish Americans, calling them anti-Semitic hate groups because of their criticism of Israel, which, of course, there's plenty of instances of this, of how absurd, and the appeal process for individuals and groups to say, hey, get me off this list. I am not a racist. I am not an anti-Semite. I am not even a member of a hate group or even a terrorist organization, let alone a terrorist organization. Why are you doing this? That appeal process is so intense that it sometimes takes people years, and it ruins a lot of people's careers and, frankly, social and political capital if they're trying to become more prominent in the American space.
Right. And so, as this relates back to Mark Robinson, and the kind of point that we're trying to get across here is that, yes, like, it is good that Mark Robinson is not going to be the governor of North Carolina and that his political support has fallen out. But what is actually occurring, if you can pull yourself back from the situation enough, is a test run of repression. It is a trial run of seeing how much they can get away with, capital THEYI.
Yeah.
How do you spell it? But because look at what they're using to get rid of Mark Robinson. It's not anything you can consider political. It's slanderous information obtained from his online history 10 years ago, obtained through a data breach and verified through more or less hacking.
Yeah.
And so if they can get you to agree that this is okay to do, as long as it's a bad guy, then they'll do it again. And so, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, the next, like, legitimate socialist threat that, like, enters into the United States political theater, the same thing happens. They're gonna go back and they're gonna find your tweets. They're gonna find whatever fucking weird post you put out, or even just, like, the thing that you liked. Like, dude, and if that's the precedent, like, we're all fucked. Like, we'll never have an opportunity to actually have a legitimate, like, leftist political voice in this country. And so, like, when I see something like this, like Mark Robinson losing his candidacy over, like, these, like, weird, unethical grounds, like, it's not like I'm like, oh, that it sucks Mark Robinson lost. It's oh, it sucks that this is going to be applied to me eventually. If you can understand that point, then you can kind of start to see that this Mark Robinson thing is fucking weird. And it does feel strange that when you try to bring this point up with anyone in, like, the Northeast tri-state area, like, the first thing, as soon as they hear Mark Robinson and they see that you're not saying is a bad guy, is super reactionary. It's like you can't have that conversation with people because people are, like, trained. And so, I mean, I think we're just, like, one step away from being from real progressivism receiving the same type of repression, because I see Mark Robinson as, like, not a real threat if you are willing to deal with him as a, legitimately politically. Like, sure, he got a, like, Trump endorsement, like, during, like, the golden years of Trump, right? And sure, like, also hilarious, Trump referred to him as Martin Luther King on steroids.
Jesus.
To which Mark Robinson said, I do not like that comparison because I do not like Martin Luther King. So once again, not the greatest guy, but he's a fucking golem. Like, he's easy to deal with if you would just do it a legit way instead of doing it this, like, strange backwards way, like publishing his online information, and using that as a means of delegitimizing him. Because, like, who is that for? Like, if you're already in Mark Robinson's camp, you don't give a shit. if you're on the left, like, you sort of give a shit, I guess, because you're not really reading it anyway. Like, because if you were really reading it, you would read the article and say, wow, that's weird where they got that information from, which I'm so surprised no one has said yet.
And the timing involved with this thing. Before Biden dropped out, North Carolina was up Schitt's Creek for the Democrats. Kamala comes in, and all of a sudden, North Carolina becomes a lot more playable. They were within 3 points in the polls. But when she was experiencing her surge in popularity, now that's kind of fizzled out. The Democrats seem like they're looking for a lot of ways to get votes. And one of those ways is to kind of look at a Trump endorsee and say, hey, look at that guy. Donald Trump said that this guy was Martin Luther King on steroids. Isn't that crazy? He's also really devious. He's got a lot of problems. He's very porn-brained. Isn't he crazy? And I think that that has actually reflected itself very much in the polls over the last 2 weeks, because North Carolina is literally determined by less than half a point. And Kamala could very well win this state, which is kind of crazy in terms that, like, Trump was beating Biden by 11 points in that state earlier this year, before even the meltdown debate. Mm-hmm. And so now it's a little strange how this neoliberal newspaper got a hold of hacked information that is disseminated from a so-called anti-hate group, Southern Poverty Law Center, that seems to consistently move the goalposts every time the political climate changes. And it was unethically sourced, yet they still put it out there. It's a little strange. Not that there is some sort of grand conspiracy, but at the very least, it's a very convenient way of distracting from the fact that Kamala, frankly, doesn't have any policies to talk about.
Right. Which is, like, the point. Because you could just deal with the threat of Mark Robinson by offering solid policy that benefits the masses. Like, it just wouldn't be that hard. But the leftist establishment is just so unwilling to do that. And the reason that they're unwilling to do that is because there is no left. Like, it doesn't exist. It is just a show. And you see it in times like this when they would rather run this guy's porn history, which is like, I mean, like, dude, like, it's the shoddiest information ever. They found his passwords in a data breach and linked them to a username. Like, you know how you defend against that? You say, that wasn't me. And then, like, all his followers are like, yeah, I guess it wasn't him. Like, it doesn't make any fucking difference. Like, you have to offer people something. You have to actually talk about policy. And, like, I don't know, yeah, like, that's the left has always been unwilling to do so.
But he was down by a lot of points before, which there was no way that he was ever really going to win. There wasn't much of a chance that he was going to win this governorship. But he definitely isn't going to win now. But, you know, as we have said before, crazier things have happened.
North Carolina will always surprise you.
Yes, it will. So I would like to kind of maybe zoom out just a little bit, because to Jake's point about there not being a left, there not being a right,
Right. No one's safe on this podcast.
No one is safe on this podcast.
Well, this is the part where we save face by saying bad things about the right.
Yes. So what we do in America, that over the last 30 or 40 years, there has been a consistent effort to try to blur the lines between the secular and the theocratic. And most of that has been aided and abetted and motorized, and mobilized, if you could use another term, by the evangelical right wing. And the evangelical right wing, in times, has had a lot of complicity with not only people that are in the more moderate right-wing groups, but also those that would consider themselves to be lifelong liberals. And it is in the goal of, frankly, as Jake has said before, manufacturing consent, allowing for the repression of the masses, and creating what I think is, through the religious evangelical right, a sort of secular American Christianity. To kind of give it a little bit more context, let me kind of explain what the general thesis is I'm bringing out here and what has created this amalgamation of culture that has of why the Mark Robinson reaction has been so fervent and so vehement, but also in many ways very misguided. The canonization or the messianic labeling of political figures has become a very potent way of mobilizing a grassroots movement, of mobilizing any sort of corporate-backed political movement as well. So you look at those that were on the left side of history, Dr. Martin Luther King, in some degrees you could even say JFK. They have been canonized in the American political landscape, where they often are seen now as these fallen messianic figures because they were ultimately killed for their beliefs or for what they thought was going to make this country better. Whether you agree with it or not, I mean, the Martin Luther King stuff is pretty cut and dry. The JFK stuff has a little bit more nuance to it. But
wait, what do you mean?
In terms of the JFK, of like, if you think that the dismantling of the CIA is an objectively good thing, some people would say no, it is not. I would agree. I would say that it probably is a better thing to not have the CIA than to have the CIA.
Right.
But that is neither here nor there. They have been canonized in the American political culture. So we then have those people. Then they're all kind of gone. Then you have on the right, you have the Ronald Reagans. Ronald Reagan was propelled very much so by the religious evangelical white Christian white political movements. And those people are essentially people that go through this mind virus where they want to repress alternative and counterculturalism. They want to repress and suppress marginalized groups, and they want to suppress the expression of those marginalized groups. With the Jerry Falwells, the Billy Grahams, whoever the Jim Graham and Tammy Faye, those folks. Maybe not so much Tammy Faye, but she was complicit in an overall effort by the evangelical right to institute fascism. And oftentimes, when you look at the blurring of the theocratic line between what is separation of church and state and trying to dissolve that line over many years, that comes out with these abortion bans, that comes out with criticizing types of music, that comes with criticizing forms of expression, banning trans drag shows for whatever fucking reason. So we look at those, and, like, I know I'm kind of going on over here, but that's kind of the, like, general byproduct and the amalgamation and what has sort of kind of, like, created there. But in the 90s and in the early 2000s, the preachers, who were often very much in cohesion with the right-wing political sphere, they were working in confluence with each other, talking shit about, gay people, saying that people need to know their place, being very anti-women and pro-patriarchy. And you look at that, and you look at these mega preachers, and all of a sudden you go, oh, wait a minute. There's all these stories coming out about these megachurch preachers where they used to have these aesthetics of, like, I'm a clean, good Christian man, I'm a family man, I'm a traditionalist, yada, yada, yada. But then you see them in a hotel room ripping crystal meth off of a male prostitute's chest. That's a little bit interesting, and that has created a cultural reaction so that whenever you see a megachurch preacher today, you immediately think pervert. You immediately think that. And you move forward from that, and you see, okay, well, because the political sphere of the right wing is so embedded in Christianity, how do we make the political figures similar to how Barack Obama was viewed, similar to how Donald Trump is now viewed, as these messianic figures. Just look on Twitter and you will compare even people like Kamala Harris and Joe Biden as these saviors of the everyman. And it just creates this level of complicity where the left and the right have often come together in order to find ways of suppression so that there is a better form of this American religion that ultimately wants to make people more docile, more pacified. You look at people like Calvin O. Butts, who said, we're not against rap, we're not against rappers, but we are against those thugs. And then you have people like Tipper Gore, who created a means where parents could repress the speech and the expression and the musical tastes of their children by having parental advisory groups. Those were both co-signed by the right-wing organizations and by the religious right. So there is this stand-in now that political figures, even as historically screwed up and imperfect as they are, they have become this intense and devious like expectation that people have. So when we come down to what Mark Robinson's reaction is, the fucked up nature of really the reaction of this whole thing outside of how it came about, the data itself, was that people are more upset with the fact on the right that he is a deviant. They are more brain-addled and more rattled, that not because he says, I would have joined the KKK, I want women to stay. The yakakaka. All of these things, you look at all of these things that have taken place, all of these things that he has said before this information came out, and the thing that really moves the needle for you is not the saying he's a black Nazi, not that he's denied the Holocaust, not that he considers trans and gay people and LGBT folks to be filth. It's the fact that he is on nude Africa.
He's weird online.
That he's a weirdo online. That should say something about
He's scaring the hoes.
Yes, that should say something about who we are as a nation and how we consume media. And I think that it creates something more devious, and it reveals more of a symptomatic mind virus that not only invades the right, it not only is pervasive in the left, but it is a consistent codependency manufactured by those in power only to pacify and distract, while more rich people get tax cuts and our social benefits and social safety net gets eroded away year by year.
Yeah, you goddamn right.
Sorry, that was a bit of
That was good.
a soliloquy.
All right, yeah. I think that is a great place to leave it, Matt. We're now on the there is no right, there is no left. It's all the fucking same. Pick up. I don't know. Go burn something.
No, don't go burn something. Go burn a leaf or some ants.
Don't go burn something. Thanks for listening. This is the promotional part of the podcast. Me and Matt got some stuff published recently.
Yes, we did.
Matt, you got a story in Egg Plus Frog, is that right?
Yes, it is. It's called Procrastination Notes, and I want to give a special shout out to Kieran Allen out of the UK. You did a great job of sanding the corners of the story, and I am really proud of it. And you should all check it out. That being said, it's a very dirty one, but I'm proud of it nonetheless.
Dirty story. I got a story published in Copy magazine, which is based in New York. Shout out to Taylor Stout. Super nice person. That's on their literature community board. I don't know, they run the website in a different fashion than I've seen, but it's called A Debt. It's up there right now.
Great story.
I think Jenkins got some stuff published. I didn't see. Let's look at it real quick.
I think it was Street Cake magazine, one of those.
Yeah, I think he got some more stuff published.
Good for you, Jenkin.
I don't have my Instagram up. Whatever. Jenkins got some stuff published. Malik is taking photos. Fraser is, I don't know what Fraser's up to. But yeah, team's doing well. let's see. I've been asking for money.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and you have money and you want to give it to us, please do. We need money for operational costs. We need to print some magazines. And oh, dude, wait, we didn't. Congrats, Rebecca Kilroy, on winning the Don DeLillo short
Yes,
story prize.
yes.
We haven't said that. On
Congrats
the
to
pod.
Rebecca Kilroy for her now award-winning short story at the Don DeLillo Literary
Boom.
Lottery Prize for her short piece Only the Worthy, which was chosen by National Book Award winner Julia Glass, who is a friend of the pod, friend of the
Friend
magazine,
of the pod.
and a human rights activist, and we love her dearly.
Yeah. All right. That sounds pretty good to me, Matt. What do you think?
I think it's pretty good. Shout out to Sam Sewell. Buy her short story
yeah, Sam
collection. There Is No Escape from Mother Mercury Press. And last thing, big congratulations to Ro Daniels. Keep up the good work. Buy the issue that they are featured in, which is issue number 3 of Cult. But also just look over their work. They are a brilliant writer and a very singular talent.
For sure. All right. That's all. Have a lovely day.
Ceasefire now.
Bye.